Yo, what's going on? So for today's Friday Night Magic, I'm actually switching things up. I'm going to move the Vraska Planeswalker Deck Challenge to week number 9. That way I'm only playing one Planeswalker Deck Challenge per month, so every 4 weeks I'll play one Planeswalker Deck Challenge. But in this case, this is still kind of a jank deck. It's not a top tier deck. It's not mono white weenie, by the way, but the reason why I'm going to do this is because I still kind of want to be competitive and try and win. And if I don't win this week, this is FNM number 7, week number 7 of the Guilds of Ravnica meta. On the 4th week, I can play, my best deck, I think, which is mono black. Well, that's the deck that I want to main as my main deck. So I'm going to play mono black control as kind of like my, I guess, insurance to try and get at least one FNM promo per month. So I'm going to move back everything, move my mono white. Initially I had week number 8 to be mono white knights, but in this case I'm going to be doing mono white historic for week number 7. So I'm essentially moving up my mono white list from week number 8 to week number 7, and that way on the week number 8 slot I'll play my mono black list, which I want a main deck as my kind of like my main the deck that I really like and enjoy playing. That way I play that deck once a month as well, and then week number 9 I'll play the Planeswalker Deck Challenge, and I'll start with Vraska. And if I do really well, then I can play maybe a little bit more, maybe even do the Raw again, because I still need to go 2-2 with the Raw Planeswalker Deck Challenge. But anyways, moving on. So moving on into this kind of jank build, which is a mono-colored deck, but everyone seems to be doing mono white to weenie at the moment. It's kind of like a fad because mono white did win the Pro Tour. It was a little bit of a splash red, but the mono white weenie, the aggro deck, flood out with a bunch of 1-drops and 2-drops. And then use something like heroic reinforcements. That's kind of been, that's what I anticipate everyone's going to be playing coming into week number 7 after the Pro Tour. But I did want to make a mono white deck. I initially had it as a mono white Knights deck, and I still have that list, and I still plan on playing it. It's just I want to play this a little bit more because I think it's a little bit more fun. But in this case, this is mono white historic legends, and I'll show you the deck build right here. So starting off with the 1-drops, we're going to start off with the 6 1-mana plays, which is going to start off with Healer's Hawk. So Healer's Hawk is going to have synergy with Ajani's Pridemate, but another thing that we're going to focus on is this, let's see here, Tishar, Ancestor's Apostle. So not only is it a legendary creature, but every time you cast a historic spell, which is artifacts, legendaries, and sagas, you can return a target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard. So in this case, this is another 1-drop that we can take back with that card, with Tishar. And it's also another, it's a flyer, it's a 1/1 flyer with lifelink. So it can work very synergistically with the Ajani's Pridemate, which is another ideal target for Tishar, because it can continually grow larger. And we also have a historic card in Fountain of Renewal. So this card is going to allow us to grow Ajani's Pridemate. So these 6 cards are going to have synergy with Ajani's Pridemate. This is going to have synergy with Tishar. This also has synergy with Tishar as well, just to trigger it. But you won't be able to get it back from the graveyard. But in this case, you will. But another reason why I really like this synergy of the life gain with Ajani's Pridemate is because I had a great, very fun time playing with it last Friday Night Magic at week number 7. With the Ajani's Pridemate in my Boros control deck, playing with the Fountain of Renewals and the Dawn of Hopes and the Ajani's Pridemate. I had a couple instances where Ajani's Pridemate got ridiculously out of control, so it's just a fun mechanic, fun synergy, and I want to include that. The 6 1-drops, we have the 4 Ajani's Pridemate, and then we're going to have the 4 Daunto Vanguards. Now, another reason why we're going to have the Daunto Vanguard is because it's another 2-mana play, but also, even though it's not historic, we can get it back from the graveyard with Tishar. It's a 2-mana play. But also, it's a hassle to deal with. We can pay the 4 life to give it indestructible, so it's very resilient to removal or board sweepers. It's a 3/1 otherwise when it's attacking, and another thing is that it's a great Blackblade Reforged carrier. So even though we do have to equip it for 7 later in the game, you know, if we do equip it eventually later in the game, it has the built-in indestructible. So that's amazing because we have Black Blade Reforged on a creature, and if it gets removed, well, we can just pay the 4 life, and now it's, you know, it's going to keep on chugging with, you know, the Black Blade Reforged. So we're going to play 4 copies of that. We're also going to play 1 copy of the Voltaic Servant. Voltaic Servant's going to be an artifact creature, so it does trigger historic. But another reason we're going to be playing with this card is because we are playing with 4 Traxos. If you don't know what Traxos is, it comes into the battlefield tapped. So yeah, it's unfortunate that, you know, you won't be able to block with it. But another really cool thing, even though it's a legendary artifact creature, it's legendary, is that anytime you cast a historic spell, you can untap Traxos. Now, what the synergy of this is that, you know, once you play this after Traxos is on the battlefield, is that you can untap target artifact. So we can play it while Traxos is in play and untaps this. After it attacks, at the end of your end step, you Voltaic Servant passively with the beginning of your end step, untap target artifact. So it kind of gives it pseudo vigilance, which is great with Traxos because Traxos is a 4-mana 7/7 body with built-in trampler. Plus, look at that art; it's just, he looks like a beast. Moving on beyond Voltaic Servant, even though we're only going to play 1 copy of Voltaic Servant, I just don't think he's good enough to be multiple copies. I think he's just as good as a 1-of to trigger our historic, also with the synergy of Traxos. But moving on into Black Blade Reforged, this is a legendary artifact, so we can only have 1 in play, but it is bananas because target equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control. So essentially, this is a card that you want to play later in the game because it has, you know, it's more powerful later in the game. It has, you know, you have 10 lands or 7 lands, 5 lands. You know, it becomes better and better as you play more lands. But another thing is that we don't want to play multiple go beyond 2, I think, because it is better as the game goes on, but also, you know, it has the legendary, you know, restriction to it, and you know, we do need to have a legendary creature to equip for only 3, otherwise it's 7 that we have to pay, which is pretty hefty. So even though things like Adonta Vanguard would be really good with the Black Blade Reforged, it's ideally going to be used on a legendary creature because it's cheaper to equip it with. But this is another reason why we don't want to play more than 2, I think, is because not only is it legendary, but also it's, you know, it doesn't establish our board early in the game. So early in the game, we want to be playing creatures, you know, Healer's Hawk or Adonta's Vanguard or and whatnot. But, you know, playing a Black Blade Reforged, it just doesn't do anything early in the game unless we have a creature. And early in the game, we're not going to be able to play it unless it's attached to a legendary creature. So that's why I'm only playing 2 copies. But moving on, we're going to play 4 copies of the Danitha. So the Danitha has synergy with the Black Blade Reforged, so we can equip it for 2 with Danitha, so that's pretty awesome. Danitha also has the lifelink built in, so it has the synergy with Johnny's Pridemate. And also, it's just, you know, she looks like a beast. Like, she's ready to deal some damage. So I really like Danitha. I want to play a full play set of 3 because I feel like it is going to get removed. And, you know, the redundant copies won't be as bad if it gets removed. It's also our earliest legendary creature, so, you know, has that going for it. Moving on into Benelish Marshal. I'm only going to play 1 copy of Benelish Marshal because we are not an aggro deck, so we're not flooding the board with 1-mana plays or 2-mana plays. So, you know, Benelish Marshal could potentially just come down as a 3/3 and not really buff our board. We might only have 1 creature or maybe another creature with Benelish Marshal if we curve out with Healer's Hawk and like Adonta's Vanguard, but it's not going to be anything like a real White Weenie deck where we're floating out 1, 2, 3 creatures, and then we play a Benelish Marshal, you know. So I'm only going to play 1 copy because, you know, it does have the synergy where if we do cast a historic, we can return it from the battlefield. So this is going to be a card that's automatically going to be on the radar for removal. So if someone's going to like lightning strike it or whatever, it's going to go into the graveyard, and then, you know, we have Teshar later in the game. We can play a historic card, and then all of a sudden we can bring back our Benelish Marshal. So that's why I'm playing with 1 copy. Otherwise, we do want to keep our Danithas coming back so we can have the Black Blade Reforged. We're going to play the 4 copies of Traxos because I think Traxos is good enough that we will, since we do have the synergies of all the historics, yeah, since we do have all the synergies with all the historic spells, we should be able to untap it. And also, it's just 4 mana for a 7/7 Trampler is way ahead of curve. And yes, it does come in untapped, but typically in this kind of style of the deck, I think we have like 25 historic cards, so we should be able to untap it. you know, there is an argument to only play 3 copies, but I think this is good enough, along with Danitha, that we do play the full play set, because legendary creatures do have the redundancy where, it's a dead card in your hand if you already have one on the battlefield, but since these cards are so powerful, I think they're going to eat up removal almost immediately, and then our redundant copies aren't as bad. So that's the reason why, and also they're just strong enough that I think we should play the full play set. So we're going to play 4 Traxos. We're only going to play 3 Teshars because Teshar is, again, it's a legendary creature. It triggers off historic spells, but another thing is that it's only a 4-mana 2/2 flyer, and it does have that very powerful ability where we can return target creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, but it needs our graveyard to be filled with those targets, with those target creatures. So we gotta wait later in the game for this to really be useful. Otherwise, it's just a 4-mana 2/2. So we're only gonna play 3 copies of that. We're gonna play 1 copy of Baird and 1 copy of Quende, just because, again, we don't want to be playing these redundant multiple legendary creatures because they're gonna be dead draws if we already have one on the battlefield. So Quende has synergy with. It only has synergy with Danitha because she has the first strike, but imagine having Danitha with a Blackblade Reforged, and then all of a sudden it has double strike. That'd be insane. That's kind of what I'm envisioning. But otherwise, Quende is just a 4-mana 2/2 double striker, and I think it's just good as a one-of. Same with Baird. Baird is just this is more of a defensive version of a legendary creature. It's a 4-mana 2/4, but it's just as a one-of. Since it is a legendary, since we're only playing as a one-of, we're not going to suffer from that redundancy. But the fact that it is another additional legendary creature and it can stall the game out so we can get all of our crazy stuff going on, I think that's, Baird just as a one-of, Quende as a one-of is just another, to untap Traxos. It's just a good idea beyond Teshar, playing 4 copies of Teshar. And beyond that, we're going to play 2 copies of On Sarah's Wings because it gives Vigilance, and it makes one of our creatures legendary, one of our non-legendary creatures legendary. So if we have something like a Healer's Hawk or a Johnny's Primate, we can make it legendary. So that's going to be relevant for the next card after On Sarah's Wings, which is Urza's Rudeness Blast. But On Sarah's Wings is going to be really, really fun with Traxos, because now all of a sudden Traxos has Vigilance, has Flying, it's an 8/8 now with On Sarah's Wings, and it has lifelink, so it's just it's bananas. It's crazy. Now there is an argument to only play 1 copy of this because enchantments are very susceptible to removal, and there's a lot of removal in the standard format. So I can understand the argument only playing 1 of these, but I'm gonna play 2 because I think it's absolutely fun to play with Traxos. But yeah, it also has synergy by giving one of our non-legendaries legendary status with Urza's Ruinous Blast. And I'm playing 3 copies because this exiles all non-land permanents that are not legendaries. So this is going to be really great against aggro decks that aren't, flooding the board with legendary creatures. So imagine having a board where we have, a Johnny's Primate with On Sarah's Wings, and then we have, like a Blackblade Reforged with a Danitha's Cabashin, because these are legendary permanents. Or even like a Traxos and a Teshar, and that's where we're playing these one-ofs. They're just additional legendary creatures that do not get removed by Urza's Ruinous Blast. Now we're only going to play 3 copies of Urza's Ruinous Blast, because it is a 5-mana play, but this is what we're going to top off at. So ideally, in my mind, I'm thinking like, alright, we have a board full of legendary stuff, permanents, and then all of a sudden, we GG the game by Urza's Ruinous Blast. They got nothing. All of their non-land permanents that aren't legendary, they're exiled, and now we're in the clear for winning the game. So that's the non-lands, and we're gonna play 24 lands. These are just 24 basic lands, just straight up plains.